Right, so first of all, INASP. I was copied in an email from somebody recently, and somewhat further down the chain, he hadn't realised I'd seen that. He said, great organisation, worst title ever. What does it mean? What it stands for, actually, or what it stood for in 1992 when we were founded, is the International Network for the Availability of Scientific Publications. And in 2012, 20 years later, we decided to drop that because it was so unrepresentative of the broad range of activities that INASP undertakes. And I felt slightly indignant about this comment because it was made by somebody who works at ODI. And ODI is now the name of what was previously the Overseas Development Institute, which was judged to be equally anachronistic. So that's INASP. What I'm going to do today is to talk about the principles for responsible business, by which we mean the guidelines for making your publications available in developing countries, by which we mean, sometimes called the Global South, countries in Africa, Asia and Latin America. And we do indeed do active programme work in 23 countries, but actually we have many more countries with whom we work just to make that literature available. And the making of that literature available, the ways in which you can do it, the principles to follow, are what we're going to be looking at today. Just a few words about us first. What kind of charity are we? We're what's called an international development NGO, non-governmental organisation. What do we care about? We care ultimately about knowledge. And before I get to the principles for responsible engagement, I'm going to be trying to give you a bit of the big picture about what's going on in the countries where we work, because I think those principles will make more sense when you see them. Why do we care about knowledge? Let me take it right back. If by 2050, 10 billion people in this world are to find ways of living in any degree of harmony or prosperity within planetary boundaries, then knowledge is absolutely crucial. And I would say that, as we are all aware at the moment of the migration crisis, the refugee crisis, money and war are obviously at the heart of some of that, so is knowledge. When I was in Malawi in February, I was talking to somebody who works, in fact, for a development organisation, is doing an MBA in the evenings and weekends, even though he has 2 small children. And he said something to me which has really stuck. He said, we're not prepared to live the way our parents did anymore. The people who are trying to come into Europe now know there is a different way of living. That knowledge is everywhere. It's been made available by the internet. And knowledge will be a powerful driver of how we go towards 2050. So this is probably largely illegible, but for anybody who's really interested in the range of work that we're doing, these 3 arrows are the most important things. How does knowledge inform development? Well, evidence, knowledge, research need to be used in national level decision making. For that to be the case, relevant research has to be produced within the countries. For that to be the case, the researchers need access to the pre-existing research literature, which is where you all come in. And for anybody that is really interested, we actually have a certain number, about 30 in total, of these handouts. So if there's one near you and you're interested, do pick this up and take it away. So, knowledge. How does this look from an African perspective? Human capital. There's huge population growth in developing countries across the world. It's rather optimistically termed the demographic dividend. But so, therefore, investment in human capital and the knowledge that and abilities that those people have are what will be absolutely critical in development. And I'll make the point here that I believe very deeply, which is the migration crisis is showing this. This is no longer a them and us thing. If climate change or war or other problems hit a country, we in the UK, Europe and North America will find ourselves involved in that as well. So these are actually global issues. And it's worth saying that this African Union agenda really sets out a marker which is very important given 50 years of underinvestment in higher education. And there are reasons for that which I'm happy to explain separately if anybody wants to ask me later. But what I'm going to do now, before we turn to the principles, is just try and give you a little bit of a visual slice of what's going on in some of the countries where we work. And those are 12 sub-Saharan African countries, 5 in Asia and 5 in Latin America. So the slides that you're going to see, which are all but one taken from staff visits to some of those countries, are only a tiny slice, only what I can give you in the time that we've got available. But I think for pictures, I hope you will leave with some sort of felt sense of what it's like to be in some of these countries. So this was Addis Ababa in June this year, July this year. And what you see is a big building going up. Note the wooden scaffolding. If you were in India, that would until very recently have been bamboo scaffolding, which bends and therefore goes up floor by floor like this. Truly terrifying sight. It's not now because in India virtually all the bamboo in the forest has got used up. So Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, absolutely full of building at the moment. Ethiopia is creating 37 new universities. This is also Addis Ababa. And so the point that I'm making here is that it's a fantastically mixed picture. You'll all have seen the headlines, Africa Rising. Yes, it is. But as Africa progresses, as it finds and utilizes natural resources, as it makes its investments, as it utilizes aid, at the same time, the problems that it's addressing most of the time look quite a lot like this. And that's just some words to the same effect. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate about the rights or wrongs of developing countries undertaking basic research or having space exploration programs or anything like that, but you will find that most of what I talk about does actually focus on applied research. And when we get applications for grants for our author aid program, for travel grants and the like, I read through those and I think, yes, my goodness, all of you who are applying, and only about 8 of you will get a grant, are doing work which is going to have a clear impact upon your own country. Right, this is the one that we didn't take, because we were fortunate enough not to be in Nepal actually during the earthquake. This is actually Tribhuvan University, Tribhuvan University Library to be precise, and as you would expect, about the least worst thing that happened is that all the book stacks fell over. But the point that I want to make here is that exactly 1 week after this photograph, the journal's online platform that we support there, which is to showcase southern research, crucial part of the research ecosystem within developing countries is their own research. The people who load those journals onto their platform, their mini highwire, if you like, were loading again. There are natural problems, there are man-made problems. What you find in countries is an immense amount of resilience. This is the National University of Rwanda. We were there to meet with the Dean of the School of Food Sciences to talk about the research that they're doing to improve various sorts of local foodstuffs and her need for help with helping her researchers write up their research for publication. But I was just going through the building and I just saw all these people cramming into the lecture theatre and I thought, yes, I'd like a photograph of that. 50% of the population of Rwanda is under the age of 25. Here are some of the really fortunate ones. Rwanda is a hugely ambitious country, post-genocide. Its ambition is to become the Singapore of East Africa. And Kigali, where I was staying, was in a sense, a bit of an expat's paradise, actually. Safe, clean, ordered, and it's a small enough country that a pretty authoritarian regime can actually get its hands around it, and they have very, very ambitious goals for development, and they fully understand the importance of knowledge and research. This is Njala University. Anne, were you on this trip as well? Okay, I'd like to just draw attention to Anne Powell, my colleague, who incidentally runs the programme for making access to research literature available, and will probably answer anything but the most simple question at the end. So this is Njala University. It was the end of, I think, a very muddy, rutted road, was it not, Anne? And then these people are explaining to a colleague of ours on the left that this is not just any old fridge. This is a cryogenic freezer. And cryogenic means that it operates at very, very low temperatures. What are they going to do with this? It's for the preservation of blood samples from goats, because they have a program for looking at how the meat production on the indigenous species of goats can be improved. This was, of course, before Ebola. We started working with Sierra Leone in 2013, was it? And then we had to suspend it while Ebola was happening. But that chapter's probably coming to a close, and we'll be resuming our active work there. So the person on the left, our colleague, is, I think, looking suitably astonished at discovering a cryogenic freezer in a very remote location in a very, very poor country. Okay, this is the Kamuzu College of Nursing in Malawi, the Blantyre campus. And there are the Dean of the college and the Director of Postgraduate Studies. We're in conversation with them, actually, and they're telling us about the research that they're doing. Now, they have only 7 PhD students. It's a very young program. But on this campus alone, they have 42 master's students. Every one of those master's students has to do a piece of research as part of their master's degree. And that is on topics like neonatal mortality, programs for controlling HIV, all things which are absolutely crucial to the development of Malawi. And Malawi actually has a marked strength in health science and medical research. What they were saying is we need help not just with writing up our research, which we can give them, but also with handling data, and that their courses are rather old-fashioned, and they don't know how to use SPSS or R, and they really want to get beyond that. They're very clear about what they need. Okay, library consortia are a crucial part of the research ecosystem, and particularly the work we do. So when we are working to make sure that these people you've seen have access to the research that they need, then it's the library consortia who are in the pivotal position in country. And I'm going to come back to them because they are the ones, wherever possible, that you guys should be dealing with if you're thinking of having direct relationships in a country. Notice the big shiny building behind them. It's a private university, actually, but brand new. I could have shown you the equivalent building on the campus of the National University of Rwanda, usually built by the Chinese, or if not by the Chinese, by Indian teams. Notice as well how confident they look. This particular library consortium, the Kenyan Library CLISC it's called, is absolutely on the button about the importance of the access to research for national development. They're not just within a librarian box, and they're fully engaged with the need to help move their country forward. And this is Accra. The countries that we're looking at have immense amounts of energy, ambition, increasing amounts of human capital. They're often moving from a pre-literate culture to a research culture in one bound. That's what somebody said to me in Rwanda. And they have not just the problems of shortage of funds and lack of money, but also trying to catch up what you could say is 300 years of progress in something like 20. Think how long it's taken us in this country to get from urbanization in the 18th century to now. Think how long it's taken to get a mature research system where everybody knows which the key journals in their areas are, how you go about accessing them, how you get published, how to referee for something. Think how much of that is not just formal protocols, but who you know, all those informal networks. And then imagine that a lot of these people are few and far between and working in relative isolation, thousands of miles from the epicenter of where the rules are made, where the new technology is developed, where John Sachs' new tools for doing very, very sophisticated things are developed. They're thousands of miles away. So what they need is knowledge, assistance, and delivered in an understanding of their local context. So sustainability is INASP's watchword. We don't ever do fly-in, fly-out training when we're working with researchers, policymakers, librarians, ICT people. We are always looking for embedding those skills within local structures and local organisations so that they can take things forward. Within the context of access to literature, the library consortia are, for the most part, or equivalent national bodies, those local structures. And what I've tried to do is just give you some brief visual glimpse of what those country needs are. The most important thing as you're thinking, if you're thinking of engaging with developing countries, is to bear some of those needs in mind. So I'm hoping those responsible guidelines will seem like common sense by the time we get to that slide. Okay, now actually there are about 30 handouts in the room, and I know there aren't enough for everybody, but it would be lovely from my point of view if every single one of those leaves the room. And if you want a copy and you don't have access, www.inasp.info is where you'll find them. So I'm not going to spend a long time going through these, because as you look at them, I hope that in the context we've talked about, you'll go, yes, okay, that sort of makes sense. But I will briefly comment on each one. So this first one, critical is to realise it's not all about the capital city. And that's particularly where the library consortium comes in. And so if you talk to a consortium, you'll find you're talking to a body that's representing the other universities and the other cities and the other research institutes in the country, not just the most obvious one. And this I've talked about. It's the best way for a country to mobilise its purchasing power and its collaborative power, just as it was the best way when consortia were first pioneered in the US and as they're used in the UK and Europe and Australia as well. So I was in publishing. I know that you are all working in a mature industry. John, you said, journal in, journal out, which has been true for a number of years. There is no net sales growth in the Western world. And so, of course, what publishers are doing is beginning to turn to the developing world. It was China first. Well, actually, it was Japan first, and then it was China. And now people are beginning to look to Africa. You see the headlines in The Economist. You see the oil discoveries. You see the beautiful new buildings. You think, right, OK, ready to stop giving it away and start making money. But it ain't quite that simple. So if you take these back, do be discussing with your sales force the fact that sudden changes do not help sustainability. They'll probably bring things to a halt, and it may be some considerable time before they can get going again. Patience, that's 4 and 5. The fact that a country is making progress does not mean that it suddenly has a miraculously increased budget. To the extent there is an increased budget, a great deal of it is going on supporting a massive expansion of higher education at the undergraduate level. It doesn't mean there's any more money for library resources or any more money for research, sadly. So we developed these principles last year, and we had a Publishers for Development, please note the name, you're all very welcome to attend, conference in June 2015 where we actually did a formal launch of them. And we brought together representatives of the consortium and the countries with publishers. And I'm just going to quickly tell you a bit about what they said. Joel Sam, incidentally, is director of the Ghanaian Consortium. Engage with the consortium. And note for your own interest that that's where you're likely to get the most sustainable, from your point of view, subscriptions. And the point that I've made, which is don't think that it's going from giving it away to charging lots of money. The country simply won't be able to afford it. Oops, sorry, going backwards rather than forwards. OK, this is Shams. One thing you learn in travelling these countries is everybody has very forbidding photographs. He's a sweetie. He's a physics professor at Rajshahi University, and he couldn't get his visa to come, another current common problem. But this is what he said in his presentation. And what you're getting here is there's still huge amounts of poverty. Lack of funding is a very big issue. And only a small number of people are actually pushing for change, but they're the important ones. So what some of you said at the same conference, awareness and usage, I thought there was a very good point, which is, OK, you're telling us to give it away or or sell it at a high discount and be patient. We want more usage. So do we, so do the institutions, and it's something we're working on with the local partners. Yeah, this is where reality kicks in. Probably there's virtually nobody in this room that can single-handedly sign off a sales policy. And everybody would love more examples of good practice so that people can get a sense of what to follow. And a very reasonable challenge as well. Hang on. It's not just one-sided. It's not just publishers behaving responsibility. We want decent, reasonable standards of behaviour from the local countries as well. And what we're actually working on at the moment is exactly this, a set of best practice guidelines, which we will probably showcase this time next year at Publishers for Development. So I'm just coming to a close. It's my final slide. To say, what can you do? Pick up the principles, read them, take them back, discuss them with your colleagues, let us know when you use them, let us know what the problems are. It's all about dialogue. Thank you.